It's been quite a weekend. Um, I had the weekend meditation retreat last weekend, and that was really impactful. But lately it's funny, the sort of the impacts happen and then I'm already bored with them. It's like there's a new moment now. I want to be here now. I don't want to rehash what I learned a week ago. But sometimes I think it's helpful to kind of burn it in a little bit, so that it's not it doesn't just kind of float away and then you forgot that you learned it. There's a fine line between kind of ruminating forever about something and kind of, treading a path, having an insight, and then next thing you know, you're not living according to that insight anymore, and you're like, "Where did that insight go? Didn't I have an insight about this?" So, yeah, so I guess while it's fresh, I'll try to, you know, burn in some insights a little bit. Um, One of them is I just watched a little talk by Adyashanti in which he talks about our tendency to blame others for blame and judge others when things go wrong. And I took a little, I guess, I don't remember what the word was, maybe assertive communication class through the Temple of the Way of Light uh, online community. And people had the hardest time just saying, I feel X when you Y. And I'm having deja vu. I might have already made a video about this, uh, but which just goes to show how quickly we can forget things. But yeah, it was super hard not to jump to judging and blaming words, judging and blaming sentences, explanations. Um, just simply say, I feel X when you Y because Z. That's it's nearly impossible at first pass to stop there. Um, so anyway, then I had a quite powerful breathwork session on Friday, and one of the things I did was some of the time was belly laugh, almost like cackling. This kind of like some I don't know, some forest spirit, witch, nymph, something. I don't know, uh, just these deep belly laughs, which I don't do. I don't do that. My mom told me my laugh sounded stupid when I was a kid, and I've kind of laughed silently ever since. And it was just so nice to just feel the energetics of a deep laughing right from the belly with completely unabashed. Because she said, the owner of the place said at the time at the start, like, this is a judgment free zone. Seriously, the more freaky you are, the better. So, like, all right, see what happens. Um, yeah, it's nice to let that out. So anyway, I was watching a talk by Adyashanti about, yeah, just taking responsibility for taking, asking yourself, what's my part in this? And that's it. It's not other people's journey is not my business. God's business is not my business. Politicians' business is not my business. Polluters' business is not my business. Genocide supporters' business is not my business. What is my business? What is my part? What can I do in a given scenario? And, this is really hard, I think, because as kids, most of us in the West were treated like our thoughts didn't matter. We were blamed for things with no recourse. Um, and we were rarely given a chance to try to explain our side of things so that, our perspective could be taken into account. Our perspective didn't matter. So I think a lot of us are coming from this place of deficit of my perspective doesn't matter. I'm not going to be heard. Um, and I'm going to be blamed, often unfairly, for what's going on. And because grown-ups are very bad at taking responsibility for their part in things, generally speaking, when it comes to kids, especially. So, like when somebody gets triggered, a very young part can show up and want to, or feel like if I sit here and uh, just take care of my part in things, the injustice will continue. If I sit here and just admit what I did wrong, nobody else is going to admit it. So I'm going to be high and dry and in a weaker position than I was before. Um, if I take responsibility for my actions, everybody else is going to keep acting like shit, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it just feels helpless, and it feels like they get all the power. Feels like it feels like you're taking all the blame. That's what it feels like, and it feels like it's unfair. But when you have two people both coming at it with this feeling, then you just end up with an arms race that can't go anywhere good. And it's not simple because when you sort of seed ground to fascists or racists, for example, um, I mean, imagine if somebody says something misogynistic toward me, right? And I say, okay, what's my part in this? What am I doing wrong? How can I be better so that they won't be misogynistic? Like, that's not it. That's not quite it. And that's what it can feel like you're being asked to do. And even the guy who did the assertiveness communication training was like, gauge your audience. This isn't going to work with everyone. If it's unsafe or pointless, you know, don't do it. But find places where it might be useful or helpful, and see what happens. And I have found often in online discussions, for example, that when I do that, or when I ask a curious question instead of a demanding or judgmental question, it can really take things in a new direction. But often, well, I mean, nothing is guaranteed of anything. But yeah, I guess the point is, if you do it in an instrumental way, it's not necessarily the spirit of it. And I even heard a story though of a woman who was raped in Central America by some goons paid for by Reagan, no doubt. And she was like, okay, if I'm going to get raped, it's going to be on my terms. I mean, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And it was this kind of like radical thing where, you know, somebody had the presence of mind not to just do what's expected, which is cower and scream and struggle and um, basically give the assailant what they want, which is a feeling of power. and instead assert your own power even over your own assault. And I mean, that's an incredibly extreme example, and most humans are not going to be able to do that. Uh, but it just goes to show there is a kind of power in looking at a situation, any situation, and saying, okay, what can I actually do here? As opposed to, this is wrong, no, 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 no. Which is how we generally engage in denial when things don't go the way we want or expect them to. Denial, I mean, judgment and blame are forms of denial because it's saying this shouldn't happen. I mean, when it's happening, obviously, rape shouldn't happen. Uh, but if it's literally happening and your options are what to do in the face of something that's literally happening, then it's not exactly acceptance as in like, this is okay, or even as I'm going to let this happen, because sometimes the right answer is to fight. But this woman, she looked at her options and she chose what she could do in that moment. And I don't know what happened in the rest of the story. I mean, it was just a snippet of a story I heard in college, 20 odd years ago. Um, and there's another person I know. I'm not going to name names because I was in a private Zoom meeting when I saw his behavior. But in the face of this genocide against Palestinians, he was just very calmly organizing the best way to help going forward. Not yelling, not screaming, not judging, not blaming, not even making reference to what the US or Israel is doing, but just what he and they could do. And you could see what an effect it had on the other people because I mean, of course, the normal human response to a freaking genocide is horror, revulsion, denial, blame, judgment. I don't blame or judge people for that being their response. It was my response too. Still is. Um, most of the time, if I'm honest. But he was able to mobilize people in this calm and thoughtful way that, he wasn't Palestinian as it happens. But there are many Palestinians who have a similar way of behaving and acting, and it's incredibly inspiring. And at the same time, racist genocide perpetrators and supporters find it very easy to ignore them. They aren't causing trouble, they don't exist. They are causing trouble, they get attacked, slaughtered, whatever. It's like heads, they win, tails, we lose. So I don't know. I mean, that's another thing I realized when I was playing soccer the other day is, there's, they're kind of tried and true best odds kind of moves to make. And I'm having deja vu again. Did I make a video about this too? Um, when did I make the last video? 3 days ago. So yeah, I probably already talked about this. Anyway, point is, there's not a rule that gives you the best possible move at every juncture. because nothing is ever entirely the same. And, the worst probability move might be your best move at a given time. And there's no way to know even after the fact because you don't know what would have happened if you'd used a different uh, strategy or move or whatever. Um, so, so it's all very chaotic. I guess the best you can do is move with your own intuition at a given time, which is easy for me to say. My kids are relatively safe. All those doctors who went back to their hospitals knowing they'd be arrested, beaten, tortured, raped, killed. That was their intuition. Some of us have a much easier ride than others. But it did sort of land for the first time. I mean, I feel like I've changed enough that it was able to land that, um, a genuinely mature person who no longer identifies as a victim, even if they are still victimized, is likely better able to make positive change than someone who's stuck in judgments and blame. And again, circumstances vary widely. You know, there is racism in the United States, and pretending there's not is it's against reality. Um, there is a genocide happening. Pretending there's not, or saying that's fine, is not what I'm talking about. It's more like, sincerely, given who I am, where I am, what I'm capable of, what the effects might be, what feels right and real and true to me. What can I do? Because I sat around just in denial, hating everyone for months, and it didn't do any good. Resistance that, like, if I feel strongly enough, the world will change. It's not like that. It just gets a very dicey territory because you don't want to think the message is that victims are responsible for their victimization. It's not like that either. It's just how can victims be most empowered? I mean, again, I don't know. Like I just said, there's no hard and fast rule for everything, so it's not like it's a general. You can say this is always the answer. I certainly don't know that, but it was useful and empowering for me to hear this message at this moment when I guess I feel guilty letting go of judgment, blame, rage, grief when it comes to something of this magnitude. But even now, I've kind of been nudged into doing more useful things than hating and judging. And so I'm grateful that the universe kind of, came to me and tapped my shoulder and said, "Here, do this. Here, do that." And but even as I was doing those things, it was almost like, okay, but I need to go back to my rage and blame now. I need to go back to my anger and grief now. It's waiting for me. It's important. That's how it feels. It feels like it's important to tell everyone how wrong something is. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it is important to say that. I mean, the people who wrote about the evils of slavery or the second class citizenship of women for most of world history. But even then, they had to. Those writers had to ask themselves, "What's the best thing I can do right now?" And what's the best tone I can take to help change things rather than just satisfy my own sense of self-righteousness, because it's not easy. It's not easy. Self-righteousness is very easy. But anyway, the advice to really look and see what your own contribution is to a given dynamic, even a vastly unjust dynamic. It landed for the first time when just today, I guess. I don't know why, but I think I've sort of jettisoned enough defensiveness and my own sort of victim mentality from young parts of myself that I could finally kind of see that in a more clear way and not just kind of like, yeah, sounds good, but or okay, go stitch it on a pillow. But actually, oh, okay, that hits in a deeper way. Um, and I had some other insights last night on gummies after a pretty intensive day of parts work and energetics, samskaras or vasanas moving through my body. I take a gummy at the end just for fun because I don't know, they're fun. It's like it sort of tweaks my brain in a small way that lets in thoughts and insights that when my mind feels a little more clamped and the normal state, it's not as likely to. I feel like they're not as likely to trickle up into consciousness or realization. Um, it's just tingly, feels good. Why not? I mean, we have one life, we have one universe. If this one likes to have some fun with plant friends, what's the problem? I mean, obviously you can abuse things or use them in a way to avoid life, but I feel like I have done that, but I don't feel like it's my general trend. Um, it's such a gorgeous fall day. Can you guys see? Well, Those maple trees. I don't know. It's probably not going to show up very well in the video, in this grainy video. I need to learn how to make real videos at some point, but not just lives. It's like the laziest way to do YouTube. Um, anyway, some of my insights from yesterday. I think I've always been imagining there's some higher version of myself who's going to come and take over at some point. And sometimes I can even almost feel that higher version kind of like approaching or watching me, kind of waiting for the moment to take over. But that's just a thought, that's just a belief, a story, a piece of imagination. And I realized last night, no, there's no higher version of me who's going to come take over at some point. On the other hand, in some ways, I feel like a higher version of myself now than I was 2 years ago because I feel so much clearer and more open and more comfortable in this existence. I still have questions, I still have doubts, but I'm not just locked in a box of them, you know? I'm not locked in a box so tight I don't even know what my doubts are. I don't even know what my feelings are. So, in a sense, a higher version has taken over, but it's not like and as I sometimes when I'm on gummies or whatever, and I really kind of for a moment forget all of my or who knows, some percentage of my neuroses, it feels like a different person walking around, like just like a newborn baby, like just looking around, seeing stuff, no thought about it whatsoever. And that can feel like I don't know, maybe not a higher version, but a different version. And then I have to kind of like concentrate to get my neuroses back and my perspective back. Um, I think even though I generally feel like, oh, they're going to come back pretty soon anyway. This isn't a shortcut. It's just a glimpse. But of course, who really knows? Is that what enlightenment is like? You're just walking around like a newborn baby, and just stuff's happening, and you're just kind of witnessing it, or fully being it with the sense that the universe is just moving, and this is your window on it, somebody's window on it, nobody's window on nothing. I don't know, man. That's weird. And of course, what if we're all all this non-dual stuff? I mean, like, oh, what a radical idea! Fully accepting what is. Like, what else are you gonna do? That's just should be common sense, right? It's just kind of getting beyond, yeah, filters and paradigms, and things that made the human species very successful in a way. But and an interesting thing is, it's almost like it would be better to be enlightened later because, at least somewhat later, because the more skills and life experience you picked up as an individual, it's gonna kind of carry over, I assume, when you're enlightened. Anyway, I'm getting going off on tangents. Um, yeah, I've been very spacey lately, as you can probably tell. Uh, um, yeah, maybe just like the upshot is I'm gonna become a bigger space cadet and not worry about things I shouldn't worry about so much, and hopefully contribute a bit more to the world in a more thoughtful and less reactive way. Um, but all that isn't necessarily spiritual. All that could just be common sense. All that could just be like, well, let's find a fun and, you know, aesthetically pleasing, narratively lovely way to get past our brain's conditioning, which isn't just a spiritual concept. It's very well understood, and I mean, not very well understood, but it's certainly mentioned in the science too about the way our brains get wired through attachment or lack of attachment and so on, and sort of healing those miswirings or practicing your way out of our normal negativity bias. um, maybe with the self-help genre, I guess, never appealed to me that much because it just seems instrumental. There's no sort of, and it just ignores our need for beauty, for narrative, for community, for for true healing. I mean, that's why IFS is so awesome because it does shadow work in a beautiful narrative kind of way. But most self-help is just like, okay, do this and then do that and then practice this, practice, practice, practice. And it just feels like another set of drills, it just doesn't feel like something nourishing. And maybe the only reason we think we need anything nourishing is just another set of human conditioning or even human nature, uh, based on living around campfires for most of our existence. But I wonder if non-duality isn't just sort of self-help with a spiritual overlay. You know, enlightenment is I mean, is it something transcendent? Is it something beyond? Beyond what? What does transcendent even mean? I mean, I guess the opposite is materialism, where it's all just atoms and molecules bumping against each other, and I mean, even that is pretty awesome. Just looking around, seeing what all there is. Can't really complain, you know? I mean, you certainly can about all the stupid things humans do, but yeah, meditation, bliss states, inquiry, sensory changes, wisdom, like, I mean, a lot of the wisdom of non-duality, the Stoics already figured it out a long time ago, you know? Um, I guess it's a new way to realize it and not just believe it. But anyway, I mean, obviously, I'm very lost in a very inexplicable universe, but I'm not as worried about it as I used to be. I mean, there were times when I was very seemingly very chill, but really suppressing a lot of old feelings, fears, doubts, and then they came up, and then, it's like, it's not fun. It's more fun to be suppressed, I guess, but it's not sustainable. And I don't know, I had a feeling that I had a feeling that, yeah, my 20s, I was so wise. I was so clued into my intuition and the universe. But in your 20s, that's acceptable. In your 30s, no, you better start getting kids, getting a house, getting a career, blah, blah, blah. Got to be someone. And so all that expansion in my 20s kind of got squished down again. And now I'm kind of, I don't know a good analogy that I can come up with on the spur of the moment, but I'm trying not exactly to get back to where I was in my 20s, but to get to a new place where it's all integrated. I being somebody, I mean, it's one thing to be a kid and be like, I don't care if I'm somebody. It's another to be a middle-aged adult and say that. It's a very different um, context. So getting to a place where I can access my intuition without feeling like I'm just a kid on an adventure that will eventually come to an end. The real world was always kind of waiting in the wings to take me back into its fold, right? And obviously, I'm lucky enough to live in suburbia with two kids and good